but as they understand it, it's the opportunity of the enablement industry. It's really a 2 billion market today, but we see that going 5x over the next 5 years, and so it's growing, if not faster than even the overall e-commerce market. And that's because you see a lot of really brands, retailers are now accelerating, their digital transformation or e-commerce.
Tech Sauce Global, sparking innovative thoughts. Today on our podcast, we're going to take a look at something that everybody probably has been involved in, and that is e-commerce. Welcome to another episode of Tech Sauce Global Podcast. I'm Chawarat Yongjiran Pupe, the global content editor of Tech Sauce Media. And as I just mentioned, today we're going to take a look at one of the big brands here in the region that has really made a name for itself and perhaps maybe gain more insight as to what e-commerce is right now in terms of the region, and also what should we expect from the market. Today, we have Kun Paul Siwarakun, the co-founder and group CEO of Ecommerce, the largest e-commerce enabler in Southeast Asia and a unified e-commerce platform offering end-to-end e-commerce management services that's trusted by top global brands. Hello, Kun Paul.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us here today on our talk. First off, for those who may not be familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about Ecommerce and what you've been up to?
Sure. It's great to be here, and thanks for the opportunity. Ecommerce, we started the company around 9 years ago in 2013, really as end-to-end e-commerce enabler, where we help brands really, provide everything from digital marketing, store operations, all the way down to logistics and fulfillment, and really support these brands under a unified e-commerce platform called Ecommerce IQ, which really enables the brands to be able to get, not only end-to-end operations, but also the full visibility in terms of data and analytics of their entire e-commerce business. And really, we started in a homegrown Thai business, and from Thailand, we expanded into Indonesia, Singapore, Philippines, and most recently, Malaysia.
That's great. And I think that your story for today is not only going to be inspirational for those who are starting out here in Thailand, as you have yourself, but also, others who are in the region as well, or perhaps around the world, as to how to, follow your footsteps. But first off, from being a tech startup to now a public company, definitely that's a challenging journey for anyone. What were the main challenges that you remember along the way that perhaps you can share with us?
I mean, I just want to say that we're not a public company yet. I mean, we're in the process, and so, but for the journey that we've taken for the last 9 years, I mean, has been really also challenging. I mean, it's never easy. When you look at really pioneering in a fairly new industry. I mean, when we first started, a lot of people didn't really understand the whole e-commerce enablement industry. But now, it's really pretty much maturing and people understand it. But but as they understand it, it's the opportunity of the enablement industry. It's really a 2 billion market today. But we see that going 5x over the next 5 years, and so it's growing, if not faster than even the overall e-commerce market. And that's because you see a lot of really brands, retailers are now accelerating, their digital transformation or e-commerce. And because of that, and the lack of talent, resources, and also the complexities of the market, naturally e-commerce enablement has become a pretty valuable service for a lot of not only global brands but also regional and even local.
So would you say then perhaps maybe your management has definitely changed? I mean, or changed somewhat when compared to the first year of your business?
Yes, when you start off, in the first year, the founding team has to wear many hats. So you're doing kind of everything from the marketing, the fundraising, you're building out the operations with the technology, and that I think is very would be challenging for many in the very early stage. But we were fortunate to have a pretty large founding team of 5, which was important because the model that we were trying to um, crack or build was complex, right? You're really looking at 3 mega industries, right? You're looking at retail, logistics, and technology, all in one. And so having a founding team, a big founding team, was really important. Fast forward to 4 or 5 years later, we now have a very strong management team. Where they have a COO, a CPO, even a chief security officer. That's really important to specialize as your business scales. And of course, having those different specialties and different functions is important to not only drive the efficiencies, but also actually innovate on behalf of our clients, right? And the group. And so, that obviously has, as a management team, we've had to mature and also really focus on roles, moving forward that enable us to really specialize in that and drive that, because our business again is not just in 3 different industries, but in 5 markets and soon to be 6. And so that's really that complexity requires quite a lot of a solid senior management that can manage different departments, functions across a multitude of different countries.
I have some follow-up questions because I'm sure some people who are listening probably are thinking the same way. I mean, I just wanted to ask you from the start, as you said, you're blessed to have a big team at the very start. Did you say 5 co-founders? Yeah, that's a large amount of decision makers or a number of people. Was it a challenge to navigate, how to scale or do decisions when you have that amount of people on board at the
Yeah, I
beginning?
mean, I'm as a founding team, it's really, especially again, it depends on the business model that you're trying to solve. It was so big that each one of us were actually specializing in the sections, right? Whether that was the marketing, the operations, the tech, right? And so, as a founding team, right, it was really important that from the get-go, we want to make sure that it wasn't a kind of MVP type of model, right? Where you do a lean startup, you kind of build 30% of the product, and then okay, let's see how it goes, right? I mean, in this model, it's like you're either executing end-to-end e-commerce for a brand, you can't do that 30%. And so depending on the model, you have to actually really invest upfront to make sure that you're able to provide that entire end-to-end services, that infrastructure, and also of course technology. And of course over time that improves and gets a lot more efficient as we scale.
So, definitely it's not an easy task to start anything and to keep it running. Um, from your perspective or your feelings right now, I mean, do you feel it? You've reached a sweet spot now, in terms of everything is well oiled, everything's working together, everything is going the way that you planned, or do you think perhaps maybe, it is still the same, or what? I mean, that's because every person who has, a startup or a company strives for that sweet spot where they're like, okay, I kind of like take a breath and relax a bit, and everything is going to plan, or do you think it's just the same kind of feeling that you have since the start?
Well, I mean, I think you have similar feelings, but it's just now at a whole nother scale and
Hmm.
a lot more zeros with, of course, big stakes at play. Because when you think about, before we were managing smaller brands, but now, your clients are, global brands, right? That have, that rely on you for their entire business. And so I would say that, that level of expectations, all right, is much, has gone higher, especially as you operate also more countries. But that of course becomes easier with tech and with the infrastructure and with a solid team. But you never, the moment you kind of feel right, like you are a sense of accomplishment, right? Or I actually worry when we do not have any problems, right? I'm the guy that goes and hunts for problems, right? Because as a business, right, like business is about solving problems. And so the moment that there's no problems, we're in trouble, right? And so you always have to think about, what other problems are there, and to get the mindset of the team to really think that way, right? Enables you to also grow and innovate, but also consistently optimize, right? And that's where I think it's really important that to have that constant fixing, constant problem solving, and it's part of one of our, key kind of DNAs of the business.
That's well said. I think that's a first actually in a while that I've heard that, yeah, definitely good to have problems. And I just wanted to ask a little bit about, you mentioned yourself that, there everyone, has that challenge of manpower or talent. Do you yourself have that challenge as well, or do you think things are getting better right now?
Yeah, I think the challenges I think with our markets, especially for specifically Southeast Asia, when you look at the talent, specifically around technology, engineering, and just basically people specializing in internet, it's still a fairly young industry, and so there's not as much talent. But now when you look at not only tech companies are hiring aggressively, but actually it's also the traditional companies that are now wanting to transform and become technology or go through digital transformation. So they too are trying to grab, similar talent. And this is where it's really important, I think, to really create a culture that, how do you kind of retain and not only retain, but also attract that talent. And I think, a lot of, as the young, young executives who are looking to join, companies, they don't only want the experience, but they, of course, experience is key, but they want an experience across a multitude of different disciplines and sectors, right? So they want that kind of entrepreneurship experience as well. For someday they might want to do their own business and whatnot. And so for us as a business model, and we, because we really we do everything end to end, from that marketing all the way down to the logistics, right? So the learnings that people that join our company, they get an opportunity to learn everything across everything from marketing to retailing to logistics to technology. And it's almost like 5 or 6 startups in one, right? And so I think that that's one thing that attracts the talent. Of course, it's hard to find talent, especially over the last couple of years, where there was kind of a huge um surge in a lot of players, not only global players entering the market, right? But
Hmm.
we start to see that kind of that remote work actually also opened opportunities for us. And so rather than, as we started to, people started working from home, we start to see that, well, if people are working from home and we're doing everything remotely, why couldn't we find talent in Vietnam, in India, in Eastern Europe? And we actually, we do have, partners and hubs where we actually development hubs in different markets, right? And that really kind of for us has, opened up that new kind of opportunity where you can find talent really anywhere in the world now. You just have to make sure you're, properly managing them. And of course, with our talented executive team, I think we've done a pretty good job of being able to, really manage remote work, remote workforce. And we see that probably going to continue to grow. But I think that as the climate starts to cool down, especially globally, we think that, that kind of paying double or, 30, 40% increase in poaching, I think that's going to start to slowly go away. And I think that, also some startups that, may run into challenges in terms of fundraising just because of the, the new macroeconomic climate. I think that, that will also kind of free up, I would say, more talent in the region.
Do you have any key advice, in addition to what we've talked about for those listening or for others who want to follow the footsteps of e-commerce?
I mean, my advice is just really, I think it's rare, but actually to have patience, right? Especially you're pioneering in an industry. I know a lot of a lot of founders kind of have that mentality of moving fast and kind of breaking things, right? And you got to have that mentality in terms of really trying to push and break things and move fast. But the reality also is you have to be patient, right, with the market. in the market, over several years, not only in this, in e-commerce, but even previous companies, right? It really does take a while to develop, right? Whether it's an advertising industry, the e-commerce industry, it just takes a while. And I think you have to be patient, read the market well, spot the trends, and of course, strategize and coordinate with your team to grab that opportunity when you see it, right? And so it's really important that, because when you don't see that immediate result, some companies or startup founders, they might kind of like give up or, kind of throw in the flag, but really it does just takes industries a while. And so therefore, kind of burning a lot of cash up front to just try to kind of show the top line growth metrics versus really understanding the problem you're solving. And also actually knowing that it will take a while to solve that problem. I think it's really important. And so you think about really conserving your runway, your cash, to give you time to solve those problems. I think that, that is, one learning that I would, or advice that I would give to other startup founders.
That's very interesting because a lot of what I've been hearing is like, the timeline or the time frame for trying new things is shortened down. You're not talking about years, you're talking about months. Try, just throw anything, against the wall and see what sticks. But it's important as well, yeah, to have that mindset, to think that, oh, you really do need to be observant of the ecosystem, the market, or what's going on, right? It's like you kind of have to have that right rhythm of like, go and waiting and seeing, right?
That's right. And I think once you have that base, right, and once you have the right economics in place and you've really understood the model, then when you think about growth capital to accelerate that, that's where it really excites kind of investors and VCs. But you got to get the core model down. And so but and when you think about today, a lot of the growth kind of high tech growth stocks, right? They're really getting punished in the market because now it's about the fundamentals. It's not really about just the kind of the growth stocks, but rather now about the value stocks, right? And we've been that type of business since day one, right? And it was that really kind of protocols led um type of business where we're just making sure that we're growing with a little faster than the market, but not kind of growth at all costs. We look at these, kind of online B2C players. They're just, market share at all costs, and they're burning a ton of money. But when you look at kind of the market drying up, right? It's going to be really painful next couple of years for these companies as the fundamentals really kind of weren't there. Of course, they're all optimizing, now, but I would say like, that's just where I think that, startups to date, I think for the next couple of years is going to be slightly different, especially the ones that are starting now are going to be a lot more frugal, a lot more bottom line focused, path to profitability and not kind of growth at all costs. And really it's kind of good business practice, right? And so I think the market's just correcting. But I think that, when you start any company today, really you kind of have to be able to just get the base right. But the moment you get access to capital, you can accelerate that. You'll actually be much more efficient at deploying that capital.
So then, from your perspective, I've asked this question many times, and it's like a lot of people say, Thai startups should have a global, a regional mindset from the very start. A lot of mistakes are made where we seem to only think of our market. We don't really think about outside. I mean, the same thing goes for other countries as well. People or companies tend to just look inwards. Um, is it still the same? Is the advice still the same that you should still always think about the rest of the world? What were you guys thinking at the beginning?
I mean, when we started, we had to get Thailand right first, right? And of course, but naturally, when you think about starting a business in Thailand, the market size itself, it's somewhat big. It's bigger than Malaysia. It's double the size of Malaysia, and obviously much bigger than Singapore. But as the just one country, it's I would say fairly small in terms of a market size. And so naturally, you can go. Again, it really depends on your business model. But I think there's room for companies to go really deep in Thailand, right? And really go deep and grab a large market share. But with that said, Thailand is a very competitive market, especially from the conglomerates, right? And I think Paul Ark, I mean, phrased the Seattle syndrome, where you basically, you have like the big Microsofts and Amazon in Seattle that basically sucks up a lot of, the competition, right?
Mhm.
And Thailand has really big conglomerates that also are very competitive and go very aggressive in that space. And so you got to be ready to, if you're going to go deep, you got to go toe to toe. But also, when you think about the market opportunities of, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Philippines, right? Investors also like the fact that you're also, diversifying the risk of just one market, right? So when you
Mhm.
have a political risk in one, any specific country, you're somewhat diversified, right? And so that's where I think the Southeast Asia play is important, because, for investors, it's all about, diversification and minimizing that risk. But also when you think about the opportunity to expand into these, really big markets with Indonesia, Vietnam. I mean, these are, even in their own markets, is huge. So as a Thai company, it's you want to be able to, expand into those markets and grab that opportunity, especially if you have a unique model. But if you're going to enter that market as, a number four or a number five, I think you'd have to rethink, that
Mhm.
strategy, right, when you
Mhm.
enter those markets, whether that's consolidation, joint ventures. So, there's really, but I think that, you do have to have a regional mindset, especially starting from, Thailand. But again, it depends on which model.
So now you're operating as you've just mentioned, in about 5 countries, I believe, right? Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, and Singapore. Um, from what you're seeing right now, how do they differ from each other at this moment? Do you think as markets?
Sure, the Thailand market, it's similar to Malaysia and Singapore. It's a very mature market, right? You have really kind of, good consumer economics, purchasing power, mature infrastructure in terms of logistics. And so, it's fairly easy to do business, and also got a very strong consumer base, but it's still fairly small. And so that means that, you can actually kind of operate, to say, profitably in these countries, right? Where when you think about Indonesia, Philippines, for example, large markets, incredibly complex infrastructure because of the archipelagos. The basket size or purchasing power is fairly low, smaller, it's lower, but of course much more mass, right, in terms of the total consumer base. And so there, you have to be prepared to be selling basically, smaller, lower priced, right? And even subsidizing growth, right? And for a much longer time frame to get to that economies of scale, right? Before you can actually make a profit. And so you got to really think about having to invest more into those markets. When you even look at infrastructure, in terms of logistics as a cost, right? To GMV, in those markets, you're still looking at like, 15, 20%, even higher than that, right? Where in Thailand, in more mature markets, it's, single digit, right? Because, meaning that you have to spend less, to build up, for delivery, and spend less in infrastructure when you're operating in Thailand or in Malaysia.
The Vietnamese market, just briefly, has attracted a lot of people. What makes it so shiny? What makes it so special?
We when we look at the Vietnam market, I mean, it's also that purchasing power, right? You have, over 100 million. It's we look at also actually the enablement in that market, at least very specific for us. And you have a lot of fragmentation, so there's still a lot of smaller e-commerce enablers, which kind of shows you, the huge opportunity. We're seeing basically 4 or 5 different e-commerce enablers there, that there's not one really dominant one. So that's a thing, that's in a really exciting um, market. And really, when you look at the e-commerce market potential, right? I mean, it's going to grow from basically like 4 or 5 billion to 11, 12 billion over the next 5 years. And so when you look at that kind of, basically like 3x growth in e-commerce, right? And whether it's consumer health, electronics, beauty and personal care, these industries are, or these categories are growing incredibly fast, and that's what makes that, market exciting, at least from an e-commerce enablement perspective.
And talking about growth, there has been massive rapid growth in terms of adopting e-commerce here in Thailand, and then the rest of the region. Is there still opportunity for Thai startups?
Definitely. I mean, I think we're still in the very early innings or early days. You're looking at, roughly around kind of 10, 11% of total retail, where, it will grow to about 20% plus over the next 5 years. But when you look at our Asian neighbors like China, it's now at 35, 40%, right, in terms of e-commerce penetration of total retail. So I think that there's, still huge, massive room for growth. And, when you look at really kind of the next 10 years in Southeast Asia, kind of it's a real generational opportunity, because when you look at not only the structural change, right, um, of e-commerce, it's not a one-time thing. It's here to stay, and we see that just even during COVID, it was accelerated by COVID, but
Hmm.
it continues to grow significantly, and we see that even new demographics. It wasn't just kind of the Generation Y or Gen Z, but even the Gen X and baby boomers. The older folks during COVID were forced to actually buy groceries online, and we do not see them stop purchasing, right? We see them actually increasing the spend even more. And in some ways, they've discovered that there's a lot more variety online. There's a lot, better price, right? And the ease now of basically because of them having to force to be able to buy things, we see them actually growing as a demographic. And so I think it's really exciting, because you can see whether it's an older generation, right, with whichever brands or products you want to target to that, the younger generation. Everyone has a mobile phone. Everyone spends 4 or 5 hours online on average, right, with gaming, with entertainment. And so we see just kind of e-commerce growing as fast across that region. And Thailand specifically, I think Thailand's a very social market, and so you will see kind of different nuances in terms of, I think, kind of you have your kind of traditional e-commerce, your marketplaces, but I think social commerce, live streaming or live shopping, right? That's starting to really pick up in Thailand. We see that, and we provide the live shopping for our brands, and we see a lot of the kind of uptake of entertainment, specifically in e-com.
So when you have that all in play, there's emerging, hot words, hot technology that's coming out that's emerging: DeFi, Metaverse, Web3. How are all these things going to impact e-commerce, do you think?
I mean, I look at these new technologies as really enabling brands to create really new experiences. When you think of like the metaverse, right? It's a really interesting new way for a brand to build that community, like around their customer, right? Where they can actually engage with them in a digital world, right? Whether it's, they're now creating entertainment, gaming, and these are just even fashion brands, right? But also the ability for them to actually personalize their brand to that consumer. And it doesn't mean just, okay, you can buy our, that, for example, Adidas, selling digital outfits, shoes, and styles for the avatars in this metaverse, right? But that's interesting because they don't have to manufacture any of these shoes, right? So it's really about the brand. And I think every brand in the future will also become a technology company, because that's really where all the consumers are, and that's where they have to really innovate and create and design. And so, they're not actually designing physical shoes, but they're now designing personalized products, for consumers. And so I think that's where it's really going to get interesting, and innovative. But, in terms of, kind of other technologies, I do see that, just a recent um, open network in India, which the government launched, which is called Open Network for Digital Commerce, or ONDC. I mean, that is really, the Indian government creating a platform, for all the SMEs to be able to trade without, basically something that competes against the Amazons and the Walmarts, right? But really kind of an open network. And what I find interesting is that, when you see these type of initiatives, it really also empowers the SME. So when you go into this network, you want to provide, logistics services, right? You API with this open network, and, you can think of it almost like a blockchain that is, kind of free and open and transparent. And really the government has launched it really to be able to encourage or grow, just commerce and retail in general. And I find that, type of technology really interesting, right? Because, you think about, what is the Web3, it's about really democratizing the internet. And it's interesting that, the government can actually engage in that, right? It's, terms of types of technology that really empowers the masses that are not kind of forced into these kind of silos or platforms, right? Where they have to, pay somewhat even, pretty high commissions, right? To transact on there. Some of them even losing money. So it's really interesting to kind of see even governments deploy that. And, I can see that the Southeast Asian governments will actually probably be looking at this model. And you think Thailand, for example, doing prompt pay, right? Think the way you're using prompt pay today, the QR code for payment, well, there will be eventually a prompt pay for commerce. So you can set up a store for free. You can, get logistics. Of course, you pay for, the logistics fees, but enabling basically every entrepreneur to be able to build on this network. So I do see that Thailand is actually leagues ahead with prompt pay in terms of other countries to be able to drive that innovation. But I think there are many things to come after that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that prompt pay, I just wanted to add that's really something that was very fast. I think some people like myself didn't think it was going to catch on that fast. But anyways, we've come unfortunately to the end of our talk. Paul, what would you like to say to our viewers? What last? I mean, you've given so much over the past half hour in terms of advice as to how to start, what challenges you might face, and what are the solutions. What is your last, you could say, takeaway that you would like to give to our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I just like to maybe share that, again, or emphasize that, the Southeast Asia and e-commerce is really this, generational and transformational opportunity in this decade. I mean, Temasek and Google, they're calling it that the $1 trillion decade. And we believe that really like e-commerce and technology is going to lift like living standards, job opportunities, and kind of create new industries, right? That's going to be exciting and lucrative, not only for, startup founders, but also even investors as they look into the market, they're looking and investing into the market. And so, this is really going to be a very exciting, kind of next, I would say 10 years. And we're just in the kind of the early days of that. And so, again, if you're a startup founder, you also have to be, patient as well, right? And you got to look at the long game in these markets. But I mean, it's great to see that when you think about, kind of all the challenges that are happening globally, whether inflation in the U.S., Ukraine war in Europe, lockdown in China. You look at Southeast Asia, and it's really kind of becoming like a global gem where a lot of companies, and investors are looking to enter. And you look at even the foreign direct investment in coming into the region, that has just started to increase actually more in the last 2 quarters. So I think there's a lot of exciting times ahead. I know we started, post-COVID has been, brutal for some industries, but now the market's opening up, whether that's travel, that's retail. So I think it's going to be an exciting next few years. And, I hope that, the startups that are listening, investors that are listening, will really see that opportunity and continue to invest into the region.
Thank you so much, Paul, for being with us here. And it's exciting, exhilarating to listen to what you have to say. And we look forward to seeing more from Ecommerce. Thank you so much, Khop Khun Ka.
Thank you.
And this has been yet another episode of TechSauce Global Podcast. For more, of course, you can always come to our website and find out more talks that are interesting about tech and technology and business, always here at TechSauce Media. สวัสดีค่ะ TechSauce, sparking innovative thoughts.